Welcome to What the Plus, a critical overview of the last century of pop culture as filtered through Disney Plus. I am Garrett Martin. Of all the companies Disney has acquired over the last decade, National Geographic Partners is probably the one that's most in line with Disney tradition. Disney first started making nature documentaries under the True Life Adventures name back in 1948, and it was one of the cornerstone brands of the company through the 50s. It even inspired the Adventureland area at Disneyland. Those movies may not be the most honest or factual nature documentaries around. They definitely have a bit of that attempted Disney magic from a storytelling perspective. But movies like The Vanishing Prairie and Bear Country aren't too far removed from the work National Geographic is known for. And although Disney ended the True Life Adventure series after only 12 years, all the way back in 1960, the company re-entered the game with the launch of Disney Nature in 2008. So there's a long history of nature documentaries with Disney. Of course, the National Geographic Society is older than Disney, dating back to the 1880s. And no, Disney does not own the nonprofit. National Geographic Partners is basically the media wing of the National Geographic Society. It was established in 2015 as a joint venture with 21st Century Fox. Fox owns about 73% of it. And when Disney bought Fox, it acquired that 73%, and they still run the company today. And that's why you'll see so many National Geographic movies and series on Disney Plus right now. One of those National Geographic documentaries was one of the surprise smash hits of 2018. It made almost $30 million at the box office, which is a lot for a documentary. It was one of the most talked about movies of the year. I remember it was all over social media for a while. It won the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. And when I found out what it was, I decided it was something I would probably never actually be able to watch because in real life I am afraid of heights. I wouldn't say deathly afraid, but very afraid of heights. I'm talking, of course, about Free Solo, the documentary directed by Elizabeth Chai Vossarelli and Jimmy Chin about the rock climber Alex Honnold as he prepares to be the first person to do a free solo climb of El Capitan, a 3,000-foot high rock in Yosemite National Park. If you don't know what free solo means, I didn't either before the movie. It's basically climbing a rock with no tools. No ropes, nothing else. It's scaling the edge between life and death where the slightest mistake will end you. It's climbing a rock this big with only your hands and feet is an unthinkable achievement. Joining me today is Samantha Allen, the award-winning journalist and author of Real Queer America, who had no idea she was asking me to watch one of the scariest movies I could ever possibly see when she picked Free Solo. Still, I'm glad she did. It's a fascinating look into one man pushing himself beyond human limitations and the toll that can take on his daily life. Join us now as Samantha Allen and I talk about Free Solo. Hey, I'm here with Samantha Allen, author of Real Queer America, LGBT Stories from Red States. How's it going, Samantha?
It's going good. I'm glad to talk to you about one of my favorite movies, but we'll get to that in a bit.
So we'll get to Free Solo in a little bit. So if the listener is not aware, Samantha used to live in Atlanta, where I'm from and live, and she wrote for me a good bit at Paste, and you have kind of totally blown up since then. You've got that great book. You've got the Amazon original story, Love and Estrogen. You've got your Audible original, M to WTF. You also just launched a new podcast, you were telling me, during the pandemic.
Yes, it is called You Should See the Other Guy, and we watch rom-coms and then make a case for the character who doesn't get chosen. So the proverbial other guy, whatever gender they might be, we argue that the protagonist should have picked them instead.
Okay, this sucks, but you totally dropped out right when you started to describe the show. So
oh, no.
Let's pick back up from you saying, basically answering my question about your new podcast.
Hang on, let me be sure my mic cord has no kinks in it, that kind of thing. Okay, you can hear me fine now, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, yeah. It's called You Should See the Other Guy. It is a rom-com podcast. So we watch rom-coms and we make a case that the protagonist should have picked the proverbial other guy. So the one they don't end up with in the end, we argue that they should have picked them instead.
So wait, what movie did you do most recently?
Oh gosh, we're doing Easy A right after this, the 2010 Emma Stone rom-com.
I've honestly never seen that one, so I don't even know who she winds up with and who she doesn't wind up with. But
she ends up with the stalker character from Netflix's You.
Okay.
Like before he was on You. He has charisma that works in a non-stalker context. But I think the other guy in that one will be Amanda Bynes's like evangelical Christian, like purity culture character. So
how do you justify that then? Like, that seems kind of a stretch right there.
It can be like a queer enemies to lovers story, you know, because Amanda Bynes' character in that movie shames Emma Stone for being sexual, even though Emma Stone isn't actually sexual. She's like pretending to have sex with people for gift cards. It's a really weird movie. It's weird that this was like one of the most popular movies of 2010.
So how long have you been doing that show? How many episodes have y'all done so far?
I think we're on like 36 or something. This was a pandemic podcast. What's the term for like a wartime baby or something like that? You know, it's the podcast equivalent of that, because we started when we all went into lockdown, my friends and I, and we've kept it going since. And so yeah, it's been going since like March or something, and just keeping at it every week.
I think the vaccine's going to end so many podcasts.
I promise that our vaccine, I was going to say, our podcast will survive the vaccine. I'll make sure it happens. Yeah. I might have to hound my co-hosts to stay home and record with me, because for me it works. You know, like for me, my life has not changed all that much, like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, which is, you know, a function of my privilege, like working from home and all that, and being just extremely antisocial anyway. So I'm worried that I'll have to get my little like vaudeville cane out to, you know, pull my podcast co-hosts back into the show once they're able to be out in the world again.
Yeah, you know, writers especially were well suited for the pandemic when it started, or at least they would have been if every website didn't go out of business over the last 6 months. Yes. You know, we were all already working from home as it is. So now you're up there in Seattle, which is very different from Atlanta, where you used to live when I knew you back here. What's it been like up there throughout the pandemic and all the disquiet in America this year and all of that?
Well, the good thing is it's essentially seems to be the mask wearing capital of the United States. Everyone is wearing a mask here, whether it's like outside, inside, which is comforting. But, you know, Seattle like was where the first cases of like in United States community spread started happening. So I remember how quickly the table flipped from people being like really worried about me being here to me just like being worried about friends in like New York and other big population centers, because Seattle like got ahead of it pretty early. Like before we were kind of like shutting things down and employers were sending people home in like very late February, early March. Yeah. So they kind of got a jump on it, and then it hit really hard everywhere else.
So for most of us, that day, March 11th, is the day when like everything just happened all at once. But for y'all up there, you were already easing into it basically before that.
Yeah, I think I started not leaving the house like February 28th. So there was like this weird 2 weeks where I was like, I kind of knew what was coming. My partner was like obsessively following the news out of China and like knew that if it came here and started having community spread, we were essentially going to end up in this situation. And Oh gosh, this makes me cringe to think about it. But I remember telling her like the US has a really good public health system. It'll probably
Yeah.
manage to contain it. We've got, entire federal agencies devoted to this. Like we'll be able to stop it before it gets out of control. And fast forward,
Yeah.
almost a year later and here we are.
It's really like the exclamation point on the end of this 4-year period of just realizing how worse off America is than we ever thought it was, like so many things that we thought, oh, it couldn't happen here. And then over the last 4 years, it's just been a cascade of all of those things happening, like dominoes falling.
Yeah. We find out that the CDC was like built out of, straw and duct tape.
Which of course
the
is a
whole
big
time.
thing here in Atlanta. I know a lot of people who work there and hasn't been a fun year for them. So
Yeah. No, that was the hardest part of all is that we could have gotten a jump on the testing, but there was like something wrong with a reagent or some piece of the testing equipment that we decided to build ourselves instead of buying somewhere else. That was a real like facepalm moment for the
yeah.
country, I feel like.
And talking about how like the hotspot has constantly changed, if there's any upside, any benefit to how things are right now, at least the entire country is just one giant hotspot. So like we don't have to worry about anyone in specific places. We just have to worry about everyone all at once. So it makes it easier to know who to worry about.
Yeah, the whole map is crimson now. You can't just be like, "Oh, that's a South Dakota problem," or "That's a Georgia problem or a Florida problem." It's an everywhere problem now, and
Yeah.
I'm glad at least that I think people are like noticing the rise in cases. I feel like the first time around, like my partner and I living in Seattle, we had to like persuade a lot of people living elsewhere to start taking it seriously and like stock up on some necessities and like stop leaving the house so much. I feel like this time around, people hopefully are starting to just watch the case numbers go up and think, well, time to like go back inside again.
I would hope so. But I mean, maybe it's just here in Georgia. But I think it's gotten to the point where everyone is like, oh, it's going up again. Screw it. I'm going to get it eventually anyway. I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing, which is one
Oh
reason
no.
it's been spreading so bad everywhere, is because I feel like that might be kind of the dominant attitude throughout America at this point.
Yeah. I mean, at the rate it's going, if people didn't institute measures, like everyone would get it. And the frustrating thing is, like, the vaccine is right there. Like,
Yeah.
they made it. Just
Jeez.
hold on for a second. Yeah.
At least during all of this, we've had streaming services.
Yes, I got a Shutter subscription at the start of this, and I've just been like mainlining horror movies for the entire pandemic,
Oh,
and
awesome. What
that's
have you
what's
watched
gotten
on
me
there
through.
that you recommend?
Oh, I really recommend Mandy is on there, of course, a
Oh yeah.
great Nick Cage, phantasmagoric spectacle. Color Out of Space is on there as well. Speaking of Nick Cage, there's a great one called Revenge that's on there, kind of like a desert, like female revenge thriller.
Yeah.
And what I love about Shudder though is that they've got a pretty deep, kind of like a deep catalog of like classic slashers and things like that. Like Slumber Party Massacre and Sleepaway Camp and some of the Fridays sometimes and some of the Halloween movies. Like I find a lot of the like Shudder. A lot of the streaming services that aren't like genre specific, like tends to be pretty surface level in terms of like the movies they give you access to. If you're
Yeah.
talking like last 10 years, like new releases and then a lot of crap. And Shudder is like, because they're focused just on this one horror segment, they can get the licenses to a few like high profile kind of movies a month, but
Yeah.
then they've got just a really great catalog of like classic stuff that you wouldn't find on other services.
I'd say the only other like sort of general streamer that comes close to Shudder with horror would be Amazon Prime. They have a ton of great old horror movies on there as well. But with Shudder, it's like you can just open that app up and you'll find something that you're going to enjoy within like a couple minutes of having it open. You don't have to spend a lot of time finding something on there to watch, which is what makes me appreciate Shudder.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Stephen King that said it or somebody, but someone said like there's no such thing as a bad horror movie,
Yeah.
and I think that's true. Like even the schlocky ones are entertaining. Even the bad ones make you feel something, you know, as opposed to like a bad drama where you might as well be watching like Fish Tank in an aquarium. So like I feel like if you're gonna just pick a movie of any genre to watch, regardless of quality, like you could do worse than just watching a random horror movie every night.
So I don't know if it's still on Shudder. It was on there Halloween of 2019. Have you seen God Told Me To?
No, but I love the title.
It's a Larry Cohen movie. He's the guy that made Q, the Winged Serpent. Basically, he is worked in all kinds of genres. His best movies are probably horror films, generally shot in New York. They have a very ground level guy who knows how crazy New York is feel to them. And God Told Me To is, I don't want to get into it because it really goes some places, and it's a journey that you need to take knowing as little about the movie as you possibly can. So if you have time and it's on Shudder, you should definitely watch God Told Me To.
I will. I promise.
Speaking of horror movies, this show here is about Disney Plus. It is a streaming service that is generally movies that Disney made, but they've acquired so many random things over the years that you wind up with the Star Wars, and you wind up with the Simpsons, you wind up with some Fox movies, you wind up with National Geographic movies like Free Solo, which I don't know if you know this, is absolutely a horror movie to me.
I was hoping you would make that segue.
Yes.
I didn't know when I suggested this that you are deathly afraid of heights.
Like, I don't want to oversell it. I can handle, like, I can be on top of a building if there's, you know, like a pretty good wall between me and the edge of it. Like, I can like stand on the Eiffel Tower. I went to the Grand Canyon last month, the only trip I've taken really this pandemic, and I was able to stand like 5 feet away from the edge, you know, but I can't look over the edge. I can't even fathom trying to climb a cliff like this guy does. I mean, I can't handle Ferris wheels. They scare the hell out of me. And here's a movie.
I thought you go to all these amusement parks.
I do, and I don't ride Ferris wheels. Like, my wife doesn't get this. She's like, how do you ride roller coasters but not Ferris wheels? And in a roller coaster, you are so bolted down, strapped in. You go really fast. You have no time to think about how high up you are. Whereas in a Ferris wheel, you're just sitting in this tiny little room that's swaying back and forth for like 20 minutes.
Gotcha.
You
So
can be alone with your thoughts.
so being on the side of El Capitan for 4 hours would not be ideal for you.
No, I mean, I don't understand climbing. I guess I can kind of understand it from a physical fitness perspective, and just from a I'm going to do a crazy thing that most people can't do perspective. I absolutely don't understand climbing without any gear whatsoever.
It's just about going to the edge of human experience and finding out what's there, you know?
But I mean, the other side of that edge is certain death. Like, how does that not just destroy them? I don't understand it.
I love this movie so much. I'm so glad I started this podcast so I have a chance to talk about it.
What do you love about it, and what made you want to pick it for the show?
I think it's the greatest athletic achievement in human history, and we have it on film. And even still, with the popularity of the movie, like Alex Honnold is not a name a lot of people know. And I'm sort of fascinated by that here we have like just this kind of like weird guy who's like done the most incredible thing any human body has ever done. And like nobody even knows his name really, you know? Yeah. I saw it for the first time on an airplane, I think. I was on book tour for Real Queer America. So like I was on airplanes like maybe 2 times a week for like a good 6-month stretch. And it was on, you know, the plane movie device thing. And I would find myself almost every time I flew being like, do I want to try a new movie or do I just want to rewatch Free Solo? And as a result, I just find it so like mesmerizing watching him and how methodical it is. I know nothing about rock climbing, but I love how much he knows about rock climbing to be able to like memorize every hand and foot movement up a 1,000-foot like rock face.
So you have never been climbing before you saw the movie?
I think I at a rock climbing gym when I was 15 or something might have gone up a wall, but no, I've never gone rock climbing. The closest I've been to watching it was we went to Smith Rock in Oregon and saw, which is apparently like a rock climbing destination, and so like all day, every day, this kind of little valley with rock faces all to one side of it is just filled up with mountain climbers who are just walking around climbing. And I went on a little walk there and I could overhear them talking about all their jargon. They would be like, oh, devil's tongues are going to be in shadow at about 4:30. So we should hurry up and climb that face before we head over to the Twin Forks. Or, like they had all the names for their different routes and knew when which side was going to be in sun and when which side would be safe to climb. And
Yeah. As a fan of just looking stuff up on Wikipedia, I did appreciate that aspect of Free Solo, is like this glimpse into like this culture I know nothing about. That's just like brand new for me to explore, basically.
Isn't it just so fun to listen to him talk? There's some scene, I think it's where he is like comparing the day's work with Tommy Caldwell, and they're like both writing in their like adorable little mountain climbing journals. Yeah. And he's like reading from it, and he's like totally juked on the last pass, 2x4 on the last crosshatch, totally zooped on that one. And it's like, I know what none of these words mean, but like it's cool that you speak this weird language that only like this elite group of rock climbers can understand.
Yeah. So were you at all familiar with Honnold, Alex Honnold, the climber the movie is about, in case our listeners have not watched this movie, or the story of his El Cap climb before you saw the movie? Like, did you know anything about it before you first saw Free Solo?
No, I think I started watching it just like on a whim. It has very striking, thumbnails of like him without ropes on the side of this incredible mountain in Yosemite. And that immediately drew me in. Of course, since then, I've like read all about him, and he's, a major name in mountain climbing, essentially worshipped in mountain climbing, as I understand it, and justifiably so. And he has this like great foundation that like works on solar power for developing communities. Seems like a really cool guy, but from just watching the movie alone, I was like, who is this strange space alien who like just kind of seemed to be born out of nowhere with the sole mission in life of climbing this mountain without a rope?
Would you say that you're generally a fan of high-level human performance? Like, do you find yourself drawn to stories of people like Honnold, who, even if you know nothing about their field, are just above and beyond what anyone else is capable of at it?
I think it's less I want to see displays of superhuman strength, and more, it's more to me about the fixation. I like stories about people who are just fixated on something, obsessed with something, and pursue it with a sort of single-minded vision. Like, to me, the climbing part is incredible. I love to watch that, but I think it's a great character study. And the directors of the movie, Jimmy Chin, have said that like that's what the movie is first and foremost, is like the climb was secondary. First and foremost, it was meant to be a character study of Alex Honnold. And so I like the ways in which it kind of hones in on how much he needs to climb the mountain, why he needs to climb the mountain, and how the people around him have to kind of bend themselves around that vision and decide how they feel about it too.
Yeah. I mean, Honnold spent, a decade living out of a van just so he could devote every day of his life to climbing. It's a story that it makes sense that there are climbers who do that. I mean, if it was about a surfer or a skater, I'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen stories like this before. But until Free Solo, I've never really seen a movie or read an article about climbers who devote themselves fully to climbing in that style.
Yeah, I mean, I love about it too is like, Tommy Caldwell and Jimmy Chin are both like epic mountain climbers in their own right who have done amazing, like groundbreaking things in the mountain climbing world. And there's a bunch of other like documentaries featuring them that I went and watched after Free Solo. But I like that like they are worried about Alex Honnold and also that he's gotten into this new like romantic relationship at the time of the film, and his partner seems to kind of not she wants to support him doing it, but also like has reservations about it that get in his head. And like, yeah, from his perspective, he's like, I've been living in a car for 10 years just to do this. And from the perspective of these people who care about him on an emotional level, they're like trying to shut it down or like hedge their guilt about it in the case of the filmmakers. Or, yeah. And I find that dynamic really fascinating that like he's just going to do it. Like, you can't stop that from happening. And so they all have to figure out like, how are they going to ethically film it, or how are they going to be in a relationship with him knowing that he could fall off the mountain and die the next day.
Yeah, you just brought up like 5 or 6 questions I was going to ask coming up in the future. Like, yeah, his relationship with his girlfriend, who I think he's now married in real life. I mean, watching this movie, you say how he's, sort of this almost alien, like unknowable figure. The relationship with Sonny definitely brings like a human edge to him that he otherwise seems to lack. And I'm trying to be very respectful of him when I say all these things. But it also kind of hammers home sort of what I don't like about him. Like, okay, there's that scene where he says this line that really kind of drove me crazy. Nobody achieves anything great because they're happy and cozy. Direct quote from the movie. And I really hate that. And not just because he was, when he said it, basically insulting his girlfriend. Like, he was talking about Sonny feeling happy and cozy and how, well, that means you're not going to achieve anything great now, unlike me. And that just really rubbed me the wrong way. I think it's a bad sentiment, and I think it was a rude thing for him to say to her.
I think he can be abrasive, and I think he's acknowledged like afterwards that this was kind of like a rough stretch of the relationship, and that like watching it back, he can see how he was kind of an asshole to her in those moments. So yeah, no, I totally get that. I mean, they seem to be in a great place now, and I've been sort of following him. It doesn't seem like he has interest in doing like huge dangerous free solos anymore. I guess time will tell, but like it really just did feel like this thing that he needed to do before he could allow himself to like have kind of a more like settled existence with
and
Sonny.
He does say maybe he would stop pursuing it so much if he had something beyond himself to live for. So maybe he feels that way about Sonny now that he's married and he has someone special in his life, that it's, irresponsible to continue to do stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, it also just kind of seems like, you brought up a moment that wasn't very flattering for him. There's some moments my partner and I zero in on these moments where she's trying to like subtly influence him to not do it,
Yeah.
Where she's like, yeah, maybe like if you woke up tomorrow and you decided like, I don't want to mountain climb anymore, I just want to play the tuba. Like that would be totally cool too, Alex. Don't let anyone pressure you. Or right after he does the climb, she says, I think it's verbatim, you did it, and now you're done.
Yeah.
Like, I love those little moments. Obviously, like, you can pick it apart because they've opened up their relationship for the world to see, and every partnership has those little moments of subtle negotiation and that kind of thing. So I don't want to pick at them too much, but it's fun to watch for little like subtle kind of lines like that.
And the relationship with Tommy Caldwell that you mentioned, like Tommy, he comes off really well in this movie. That scene of them in their journals, I thought it was a great contrast because, like you were saying, Honnold's journal was just solely about the climbing and what he did that day, whereas Caldwell was clearly having some more, maybe not poetic, but like more about the overall experience of the day, and not just the actual facts of the climb in his journal. It's interesting to see these two who are very clearly good friends and respect each other, but are obviously, very different in how they approach this hobby.
Yeah, Alex has like solved El Capitan like it's like a math equation, like that's, and it seems like to do something like that, it would take that kind of mindset. It's such like a long technical climb.
Yeah. So it really hammers home again the what I think is kind of a predictable, obvious fact that free solo climbers, they pretty much inevitably die doing this, right? Doesn't it seem like a little I don't know, I don't want to say shitty, but like for the filmmakers and his friends, I mean they basically encourage him to do something that's this self-destructive. I mean, is that responsible of them?
My understanding is they knew he was going to do it anyway. There was no stopping him from doing it. He would have done it even if it weren't filmed. And he didn't want to feel like obligated to kind of like, from listening to things around the movie, I think the primary issue was he was going to do it anyway, but he knew that any cameraman who filmed him on more difficult stretches, like if he fell on that stretch, he knew that cameraman would feel guilty about it, and he didn't want to leave them with that guilt. Like he was totally cool with dying. Like he had made his peace with that being a distinct possibility on the climb. And his concern seemed primarily to be that he didn't want to leave any of his friends, because it's a very small group of people who can like handle a camera on El Capitan.
Yeah.
And so that's how they arrived at things like, oh, they'll film it with like telephoto lenses from the bottom and like remote cameras on the face, and maybe some people at a distance. So yeah, I found that aspect of the movie fascinating. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't troubled by it so much as I was like really interested in that process of negotiation and how much the film became about making the film, not in this like painfully meta way, but in like a really gripping way where it was almost as dramatic to watch the cameraman at the base of the mountain being unable to watch him as it was watching him actually climb the mountain.
Yeah, that was my POV character right there. That was what I was basically doing watching this movie.
Yeah, he's like an audience stand-in where he's making the movie and he can't even look at what he's making. And so imagine how people at home feel.
So when he gets to the top, like obviously he's super excited. Yes, he does make it to the top. Listener, if you haven't watched the movie, he does not fall and die in the film, thank God. But his reaction to doing this completely inhuman thing that no one has ever done before, just like the superhuman feat, is to just say, "I'm so delighted," over and over, which is like how I feel when I'm eating like a really good donut or something, Like, how weird is it to be that blasé about this just like utterly unthinkable thing that he just put his body through?
Well, they have him do that brain scan where like his amygdala essentially doesn't light up unless he's like doing something really like extreme. So it seems like that might just be what it takes for him to feel delighted. And I think there is like a really interesting personal moment in the film where he's filling out some mental health questionnaire and he kind of like pauses over a question about like depression. And, I think that like, that's a really interesting moment where it's like, I honestly feel as a viewer, like he's trying to feel something, like it's not just a technical achievement for him, even though he often frames it as such. Like there is an emotional aspect to him climbing the mountain, and like for him climbing El Capitan might be what it takes to experience something like happiness for like an afternoon.
Yeah. I mean, I like that the movie doesn't get too deep into trying to psychoanalyze him. And it definitely lets the viewer make assumptions from that, but the movie itself doesn't really highlight that. And I think that's a smart choice on the movie's part.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the achievement itself is incredible, but I think that can sometimes overshadow like how fantastic the movie is. It won an Oscar, I believe. So
Yeah,
like
that's
like
documentary, yeah.
the film itself is so well made, and in Jimmy Chin, I believe he and his wife directed it together.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I knew her name so that I'm not omitting her, but they are climbers and photographers, so like they like are able to shoot it in a way where they understand the technical craft, but then it's also like a really quality film. And there's like a bad version of this movie out there that's like too focused on the climb itself, or that goes too deep into trying to psychoanalyze Alex instead of like leaving you these little breadcrumbs that you can kind of piece together yourself in like a really subtle and rewarding way. But like it's neither of those movies. It is just like a pitch perfect like balance of character study and climbing action that isn't heavy-handed and isn't too inside baseball. I think it's like a great movie on top of the spectacle of the climb.
There was one moment I was afraid it was going to turn into Faces of Death when they have the montage of free soloists who have died climbing, and it ends with that shot of a close-up of a guy hanging from the side of a cliff and then falling off, and you just see him plummet, and it's not until he gets near the bottom of the screen where you see that he has a parachute. And you see that he deployed his parachute in time, and then it cuts to him on the ground laughing. And then it says that he died during a different climb like later on. But my wife was sitting in the living room. I was watching it in the bedroom, and she heard me yell, "Oh my God!" at that moment. And she was like, what is he watching? What just happened? Like, I don't react that way to horror movies. I don't react that way generally to any kind of entertainment. And yet that moment of that movie, it really freaked me out. I thought for 20 seconds, I just saw a guy plummet to his death off the side of a mountain.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, none of the free solo people who died have like done so on camera, like in some kind of high profile way, which sort of speaks to the fact that like he was going to do this anyway. Like the kind of person who free solos, they're not doing it for clout, you know,
Right.
They're not doing it for the gram. They're doing it because they want to like climb with maximum stakes and just feel what that feels like.
And another comparison to surfing, it's totally got that sort of Zen type mentality to it. Like that, I forget his name, but the older climber who had done some free soloing, but nothing to the level that Honnold was trying, who kind of shows up just sort of in his advice, and he totally has like a mentor figure feel to him. That again reinforced just like this whole, how it's for them and their own personal, sense of self-worth or whatever, like that sense of achievement more than anything else.
Yeah, I love that character. It's almost like a too good to be true moment for the film that they like, rock climbing sensei, like the free solo guy who had hung up his climbing shoes kind of character. Because I love that moment where Alex tries to go up one day and then kind of gets spooked on one section and radios in to come back down, and he encounters the older mentor character, and he's like, I just felt weird on the free blast or whatever. I decided not to do it. And he's just like, good for you. Good for you, son. Like, I love that moment.
And despite how stressful a lot of this movie was for me, I'd say the most shocking thing overall about it is how it ends with a Tim McGraw song.
A lot of movies seem to like their closing credits are like, oh, okay, that's a choice,
And I think it was an original song too. Like it seems like it was one written for this movie by Tim McGraw or whatever country songwriter wrote it.
Are the lyrics about free soloing? Because I miss that era of movie making where they would like, there's some Freddie movie, it might be like Dream Warriors or something, where they got some popular 80s band to like record a song called like Dream Warriors, and then over the closing credits it's like, Dream Warriors, and it's like, wow.
Yeah.
thematic tie-in. I would love a Tim McGraw free solo number.
It's called Gravity. I think, look at what you've overcome to get here. I totally think it was written for the movie. I think National Geographic sent him a rough cut or something. He's totally singing specifically about Alex Honnold. So you've written a book. You've finished a book. You've published a book. Most writers never do that. Did you see any sort of similarities, between finishing a book and, say, climbing the sheer rock face of a cliff like El Cap?
I don't want to flatter myself by comparing anything I've ever done in my life or will ever do in my life to free soloing El Capitan. But I think part of the reason why I gravitate toward it is because I very much relate to like a single-minded sort of pursuit of a goal,
Yeah.
When I'm finishing a book or some big writing project, I essentially get tunnel vision on it, and I'm sure a lot of creative folks can relate to the point where I sort of become not really a person anymore. I'm just living in a pile of takeout boxes, and just all I can think about from when I wake up to when I go to bed is getting the words out. Probably not the healthiest way to approach something, in similar ways as we can critique Alex Honnold, devoting his whole life to climbing this. But there is something deeply relatable about just needing to shut everything out to be able to get something done.
You're dirt bagging in the van of your own prose.
I guess. I don't know. It makes it sound so poetic. But yeah, I mean, I just I don't know. Maybe I never relate to writers, and I know writers like this who are oh yeah, no, I wake up at 6 a.m. every day so I can get a couple hours of writing in before everyone's up, and then or who just stick to some kind of routine or regimented thing where it's just sort of a casual thing that they slip into and out of in their day. To me, maybe this is a sign I'm actually a very weak writer, is it takes full concentration for me for hours and hours to be able to write and produce something.
Well, hey, I have loved talking to you about this movie, and despite how it might sound, I did find it to be a really well-made movie about a really fascinating subject, even if it scared the living Jesus out of me the entire time I was watching it.
I am sorry, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. I know maybe you were hoping I would pick a fun, lighter Disney Plus offering, but got to go to that Nat Geo content. Got to show off the breadth of Disney's acquisition.
Exactly. Well, that makes it interesting to show, how much, because that's the whole point of the show. It's here's not just one studio making one type of product, but here's a company that over the last century, between what they have made and what they've acquired, you can kind of track the entire progression of popular culture since 1920 or something. So it's good to have movies like this. And this is, I think, the 8th episode. I have yet to do an animated feature or a Disney short or anything. No one has picked anything that you would think of when you think of Disney, I think. I mean, High School Musical is obviously a Disney thing. And one of the live action animation remakes was one of the movies we've done. But yeah, no one has picked one of the classic features yet.
Well, they're saving them for, tentpole episodes, 10, 20, 50.
All right. Well, thanks again, Samantha. Samantha Allen, where can people find you and your work on the internet?
I am at SLA Writes on Twitter, and you can find my books anywhere. Real Queer America would be in bookstores and on Amazon, of course. And my Audible original is out now on Audible.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks for listening. I got to thank Samantha Allen once again for forcing me to watch a fantastic movie and for being so gracious as to appear on this show. Have a great weekend, everybody. Next week is a holiday. We're going to have an episode. We're going to have a guest. we'll find out who and what it's about when that time comes. Thanks again. This has been What the Plus. I am Garrett Martin. I'm going to talk to you again soon.